Israel's war on Gaza has been going on for 7 months, and just hours after Hamas agreed to a ceasefire proposal, Israel launched a ground invasion and seized control of the border crossing in Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians had been sheltering. Meanwhile, here in the United States, the crackdown against campus protesters calling for an end to U.S. support for Israel's war on Gaza continues. Students have faced violence from the police, they've been arrested, they've been suspended, and some have even been expelled. Joining me now to discuss this is Batya Ungar-Sargon. She is the opinion editor at Newsweek and believes the Israeli military's conduct in Gaza has been just. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about what's going on right now. Israel has killed nearly 35,000 Palestinians, a number that includes more than 13,000 children. The head of the World Food Program now has stated that northern Gaza has entered a mode of full-blown famine. You've made the case that Israel had the right to respond to the October 7th Hamas attacks. At this point, though, do you see Israel's response as proportional?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, the numbers that you cited, we get from Hamas, which has an interest in inflating the numbers. In fact, Hamas itself released a report on Telegram about a month ago in which it stated that it cannot account for 11,000 of the people that they thought had been killed, effectively reducing the number to 22,000 by Hamas's own count. What proportionate means is it's not the proportion of civilian casualties on either side that we are comparing. Proportion in a war is the number of civilian casualties proportionate to the operation. And when you think about the number of Hamas militants Israel has killed relative to the tragic civilian casualties, it's very clear that that number is within the realm of what we have considered to be just war for, modern history.
Got you. So a couple points. First, the Gazan Health Ministry historically has been very accurate with its death reports. They held up to the UN numbers within 4%. They've held up to Israel's own scrutiny in the past. They've held out to the West Bank Palestinian Authority's numbers, and of course, they're not friends with Hamas. So whether it's Israel, whether it's the West Bank, or whether it's outside international bodies, these numbers tend to be pretty accurate. And as far as the 11,000 number that you mentioned, I read the Telegram in English and in Arabic, and it wasn't that they couldn't account for the bodies. They just wanted additional information identifying those people. So I just want to be clear, I don't want people to think that somehow Hamas had like a missing 11,000 bodies and that they'd inflated the numbers. There's no evidence of that. But to your more fundamental point, which I think is an interesting one, we've seen some things that seem to me outside the boundaries of just war. Countless human rights observers have documented how the attacks in Gaza have been somewhat indiscriminate. Residential buildings being bombed, schools, refugee camps, hospitals, even journalists have been targeted. How do you make sense of that?
I think the word targeted there is being misused. There are always tragic occurrences in any war, and what we have to determine in the case of Israel and Gaza is, are these war crimes, or is this just war, which is always horrific?
Yeah.
There are always tragedies in war. Israel requires for any military attack 2 independently verified pieces of intelligence to attack a building, or even more so for a school or for a civilian building. I'm curious what you think of the fact that Israel has not entered a single hospital in Gaza in which they did not find evidence that Hamas had been using it to a certain degree. Now, you might say they've inflated the number of things they would have expected to find there, that they said there was going to be, some huge compound, and that maybe they didn't find it in some of these cases.
Yeah, one time I saw a box of dates. I was like, if I look under a hospital like Shifa, for example, and I see, minimal evidence of a Hamas presence there, it makes me say, all right, this isn't a military target. But there's a bigger point here that I wanted to get at, which, to your point, for example, Israel's October 9th strike on the Jabalia refugee camp killed 39 people. According to the UN Office of High Commissioner on Human Rights, Israel provided no military objective. They provided no advance warnings. This is an example where this seems to be indiscriminate and certainly outside the boundaries of law.
The vast majority of the operation has been based on not a single, but on two independently verified pieces of evidence that a situation is being used by Hamas in a military way. Now, of course...
So how would you explain the Jabali refugee? I mean, 39 people is a large number. How would you explain that then?
This is a war. I mean...
Right, but there was no military objective and no advance warning. Are those two things can't be defensible?
I can't recall that specific event, but there was, even from Israel's point of view, they killed 3 hostages in an accident during one of these operations. That obviously was not intentional, right?
That one makes sense to me, but killing 39 people with no military objective or advance warning seems different to me. But let me give you another example. October 31st, Israeli military airstrike happens on a 6-story apartment building near the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza. That one killed 106 civilians, including 54 children. According to Human Rights Watch, no evidence of a military target in the vicinity of the building at the time of the attack, and Israeli authorities have offered no justification for the attack. I mean, these are large numbers. How do we explain that? Does that give you pause at least?
No, because, this is a war. And in a war, you have to go on the evidence that you have, on the intelligence that you have.
But they're not offering evidence.
And the vast majority of Israel's operations in Gaza have been based on a lot of intelligence. They've significantly weakened Hamas's ability to organize and to retaliate against them.
I hear you saying the majority, but let me give you another example. In February, a group of UN special rapporteurs expressed their concern about the, quote, deliberate targeting and extrajudicial killing of Palestinian women and children in places where they sought refuge or while fleeing. Some of them were reportedly holding white pieces of cloth when they were killed by the Israeli army. Again, there are, for every sort of claim that this is a just war and that, bad things happen in war, there are just numerous instances where there seem to be clear violations of the rules of war, clear violations of international law, clear war crimes being committed. Is it possible that two things are true, right? That there are some unfortunate casualties that happen, maybe the hostage situation that you're describing, but at the same time, that also Israel has committed some war crimes here?
There's probably, at the end of this, going to be evidence that Israel has committed some war crimes. There has never been a war in which there were not war crimes committed.
That's
but
true.
That does not get to the heart of whether this is a just war and whether, as I keep saying, the vast majority of the operation has been done according to the rules of international law. But of course, there has never been a war without war crimes, and there will be evidence of those. The shooting of the 3 hostages is, of course, very good example of one that even I think Israel would acknowledge.
So do you support then a full-scale investigation of Israeli war crimes?
Of course. I mean, why would we not? Who would not want that?
You'd be surprised how many guests I've had on who say just the opposite. Let's talk about these campus protests. I want to talk to that because that's obviously something that's incredibly important in the United States conversation right now. You've referred to students protesting as, quote, intifada revolutionary wannabes. Saying, I hear you laughing a bit. I mean, it's an interesting turn of phrase. You said that they're a privileged caste engaging in self-indulgent narcissism.
Well, they chant intifada revolution, right? Like, what would you call, I mean, that's their chant, right? So I'm laughing because of the wannabes part, because like as someone who lived through the actual intifada, like, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't think that they're actually dangerous, but I think that they wish they were in a way because they chant intifada revolution, right? It's like, well, what do you think that means? Like vibes or?
It's an interesting question. I guess what I was curious about was you equating the anti-war protests to narcissism and self-indulgence.
Yeah. Well,
that's the part I'm
Yeah. Because I'm outraged about it, actually, because the Palestinians deserve good advocates, and this is not that. And the reason I know that is because I look at what Dr. King did, which was appeal to the common humanity in every person and say, you are like me and I am like you, and I know that together this nation is better than what we are right now and can be. And he managed to change the nation. To me, what these people are doing is the opposite. They're not showing up and saying, the occupation is unbearable, right? How can we create a situation where Israel will no longer be doing that? How can we convince the most amount of people in the US, but also in Israel, which is like the stakeholder here and the person who has the entity that has control over it, that this is the wrong way and here is a different path? They are not trying to appeal to the broadest swath of the American people and change their minds. They're doing the opposite. They're intentionally using extremely violent, vile, and triggering language to limit the number of people who are going to agree with their cause, to limit it so that they can feel moral superiority over everyone who doesn't agree with them. And I think that that's outrageous.
Couple thoughts. The first thing is, I think the difference with the King argument is that MLK was convincing his fellow citizens domestically on a kind of civil response to structural injustice internally. I think that's different than King's response, say, to the Vietnam War. He wasn't challenging the campus protests. When King dies in '68, he wasn't saying we shouldn't be on college campuses protesting the war.
But it was our war. Like, we are not fighting in Gaza.
We're funding it, though, and that's literally the argument. That's the argument, though. That, just hear me out. That's the argument that the students are making. They're saying that we are funding it through our tax dollars. We are sending weapons, and the universities that they're at are literally investing in the Israeli state, and so they're calling for a divestment movement. They're saying we're complicit, and we want to stop being complicit.
But what we are actually doing, and this is the way the vast majority of Americans see it, is we are helping an ally that does actual work for us.
The vast majority?
80% of Americans back Israel over Hamas. Yes.
Yeah, but 55% disapprove of Israel's war in Gaza. 70% support a permanent ceasefire and de-escalation of violence.
Who does not support a permanent ceasefire?
Netanyahu?
I support a permanent ceasefire.
So you support...
Not this minute, but you need to...
That's what Americans want.
That is not what they're talking about.
No. I mean, of course, everybody supports peace.
Yes,
do you like ice cream? Do you like kittens?
That's what they're saying. That is what they're saying. They're saying we like kittens. We want peace. We want a permanent ceasefire. Everybody wants... Who would say no to that?
People who believe that a permanent ceasefire is not possible because they believe that Hamas is perpetually violent and that the only way they can be controlled is by Israel maintaining effective control and effectively an apartheid domination of all of historic Palestine. That's what lots of people believe. But again, 52% believe that the U.S. government should halt weapons shipments to Israel until Israel stops the attack on Gaza. That doesn't sound like support of Israel.
No, it's until Israel stops. The question was, should America, I mean, the poll that I saw, should America halt shipments of weapons to Israel until Israel stops halting humanitarian aid?
No, I'll read that's not true. That's just not accurate. I'll read the question to you.
Okay, that is the study that I saw.
There's more than one study, and the one I read and that I'm quoting from says, do you think that the U.S. should stop weapons shipments to Israel until Israel discontinues its attacks on the people of Gaza, end quote. And 52% said yes. Yes,
because its attacks are not on the people of Gaza. They are on Hamas and Hamas's infrastructure and Hamas militants.
But then there have been other people who have made the claim that we're not at war with Hamas. We're at war with the state of Gaza. We're at war with the Palestinian people.
Yeah, people say stupid things. I mean,
yeah, but some of them are in. Yeah, but
people in our government say stupid things too, right,
yes,
Mark?
but if it's John Bolton, for example, we can't just say, oh, people say crazy things. If you're the architect of foreign policy, that's different. I'm talking people in Netanyahu's cabinet are saying this stuff.
Yeah, you have to show, though, that it's had an actual impact on the way that the war is being executed. And
well, I did earlier. I showed all the different, the refugee camps, the hospitals, the indiscriminate strikes that are killing, dozens of people. I'm just going to give you an example here. Retired Major General Giora Island, also former head of National Security Council and the current advisor to the defense minister. So this isn't just some retired guy who's just talking from his chair. He clearly stated on November 19th that the whole Gazan civilian population was a legitimate target and that, quote, severe epidemics in the south of the Gaza Strip will bring victory closer. So even the epidemics in the south are seen as evidence of defeating the quote-unquote enemy. These epidemics aren't happening just to Hamas. Hamas isn't just starving. Hamas isn't just getting sick. He said Israel is not fighting against a terrorist organization, but against the state of Gaza. This is the advisor to the Minister of Defense.
Wait, do you deny that Hamas has a political wing that runs the state of Gaza? I mean, the state meaning like the political wing of Hamas? Do you deny that?
No, I don't deny that. Here's the problem. If you say, we're fighting against all of the Palestinians. They're all a legitimate target. And I'm not fighting against Hamas, but I'm fighting against the state of Gaza.
I don't think anyone should say everybody's a target. I don't.
But that's what.
But I don't need to defend that. I need to defend the IDF's operation. But you don't think there's a connection between Netanyahu? I know that there is no connection between that because I know that the IDF is not responding to what this. They're not looking at Haaretz and Yisrael Hayom.
This is the advisor to the Minister of Defense. Again, this isn't some retired general saying get off my lawn. This is the advisor to the Minister of Defense.
You can look at what the IDF has done on the ground.
Yes.
The fact that they have issued millions and millions of warnings. I mean, this has never happened in the history of warfare before, where a military is literally telegraphing to the enemy what they are about to do in order to warn civilians to get them out of harm's way. That has never happened before in the history of warfare, that a military is literally warning the enemy to protect the enemy's civilian population.
We have seen that before. We've seen it in Syria. We've seen it in Iraq. But
to the degree that the Israelis...
That's a different claim. I was responding to your initial claim, which is that no army's ever done that. But there's...
To the tune of millions and millions and millions of messages, warnings, multiple warnings, literally allowing their targets to escape to protect the civilian population. I mean, does that not have any merit with you? Do you not think that's deserving of like recognition, that people should recognize that that happens?
So I think this isn't extraordinary to allow civilian populations to escape.
No, but the extent to which the IDF goes is extraordinary.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, so we'll have to leave it there. Batya Ungar-Sargon, thank you so much for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody, that's our show, UpFront. We'll be back next week.